by my son, and he will be co-hosting our Revelation study as we continue to go chapter by chapter and verse by verse through the book of Revelation, looking at end times and prophecy and how it aligns to what's been happening in the world. Justin, are you there?
I am. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you all.
All right, and I'm looking forward to getting into this particular study and examining the book of Revelation. It is always a fascinating topic, and it's something that a lot of people have been um, looking into, especially with all the New World Order and all the everything with famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places and wars and rumors of wars. It all seems to be unfolding as Messiah warned us about. And so a very interesting book to look into, especially in the times that we're in.
Yeah, definitely. It's been relevant for the past 2,000 years, and it only becomes more and more relevant as we get closer to the return of the Messiah and the establishment of the millennial kingdom, which will happen. And what's really interesting in our time is that we're seeing this great deception be sold to the masses, to the blind public, that the Messiah who returns is actually going to be an enemy, like alien force. And then you see this, how the whole deception is being established is really intense. We see in Revelation things like climate change, right? And of course, the world is like, well, the two witnesses, they're not the ones that are going to shut up the rain, even though Revelation says that's what's going to happen. Instead, it's going to be due to climate change. And in Isaiah, when it says that the heat of the sun is going to increase sevenfold, they're going to say, that's climate change. Look, and they're going to, of course, use that for their agenda.
Right.
But the craziest thing is going to be that the enemy is going to gather the nations of the world to make war against the Lamb that sits on the throne. And this is like post-millennial reign, when the Messiah is on the earth, that the great deception is going to continue on even after the harpazo, or the resurrection, and what many people call the rapture, the catching away, and then the return of the saints and the establishment of the millennial kingdom in Israel. And then after that 1,000 years of the Messiah reigning on earth, then the enemy is going to continue his great deception again. He's going to be released from the bottomless pit, and he's going to gather the nations to make war against the Lamb that sits on the throne. I mean, how insane is that, and how great is the deception? Insane. I mean, and it's the same deceiver that is working even in our time right now. So, we shouldn't be surprised when we see all the broadcast spells out there, and the tell-lie vision, all of these lies that are just being like really just sold as gospel truth to the masses. It's a programming that we're seeing taking place. And if the enemy is able to gather up everyone to make war against the Creator, that's been reigning in righteousness and in true love and peace during the millennial reign, if he's able to gather a giant army after the Messiah has been reigning, just think about what he can do before the Messiah has come, and then really just open your eyes to see what in the world is taking place right now. And it's absolutely absurd. But we are going to be getting into our Revelation study again tonight. We're going to be going through Revelation chapter 8. So we have covered in previous shows, or previous studies, Revelation chapter 1 all the way through Revelation chapter 7. And of course, it's been 2 weeks since we had our last Revelation study, since we had two Ask Me Anythings last week with Brother Gary Wayne, and then with yourself. And that took up our show slots last week. So it has been 2 weeks, but hopefully everybody is still fresh and following along exactly where we are, because in Revelation chapter 7 we kind of saw an intermission between the unlocking of the seals. We saw in Revelation 6 the unlocking from the first to the sixth seal, and then in Revelation chapter 7 we saw the sealing of the 144,000 of all the tribes of Israel, and then we saw what I believe was a the rapture event, when we saw all of the Christians up in heaven surrounding the throne. And I
Yes.
thought that, okay, well, this is really interesting to have that timing, and if I understand that properly, so after that, now we are in Revelation 8, and this is the unlocking of the seventh seal. And directly after the seventh seal is unlocked, then we see the seven trumpets are unlocked. And I've never really considered this to be like, I guess, like chronological perfectly. In my mind, I'm always kind of like, okay, Revelation is like jumping around, but I kind of want to just challenge myself this time to kind of just read it like it's chronological. And that's the question I pose to everyone that's joining for the study tonight. Like, where do you think these seven trumpets line up with the seven seals? Because here we see in Revelation 8:1, and go ahead and I'll share my screen with you too so you can see, and then I'll share it with the chat, of course. And yeah, shout out to everybody who is joining in the YouTube live stream and everybody joining over on Truth Frequency Radio. It's great to see you all, and prayerfully you'll come to know the truth, and most especially the truth of the salvation that's been purchased for us on the cross. Hallelujah. All right, so in Revelation 8:1, we see that it says, when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. All right, so that's that. And that's the end of the seven seals. So that's kind of an abrupt ending. It's not like, okay, now we're going to go back in time, and now I see seven angels who stand before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. It kind of just seems like, okay, this is going in order, right? What's your take on that, Dad?
Let me look at that again here for just a second. I was pulling up the chat room. Let me look at your screen. And it's Revelation 8, the beginning. Is that correct? Revelation 8.
Yep, we're doing Revelation chapter 8.
Let me pull it up so I know exactly. And first verse, right?
Yep, my question specifically was, how do you think the chronology is going here? Because we see the seventh seal unlocked, and then directly after, it's like we're moving straight into the seven trumpets. So it seems chronological here, but I was just asking what your take on that was.
It's always, of course, hard to try to interpret, and yeah, but I do think there is a pattern of congruency that is written through the scriptures. But I do also think that John flashes back and also goes forward in vision as well, and so some things seem like that we have that kind of thing happening. But as far as the seals, the trumpets, the bowls, all of that, I think are um, a response to one occurring after the other as well. And so, yeah, I do think that there is a, like a action and a reaction that comes from what's happening in the scriptures. But we can, of course, see more as we continue through. What do you think about it?
Yeah, just like I said a little earlier, I think that it definitely seems like the seventh seal unlocks, and then we're just moving straight from the seventh seal into the seven trumpets. And I want to read it that way today. I've never really considered that it was. I've always just kind of thought, okay, Revelation is very mysterious. He jumps around in his visions, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't really read it perfectly. I don't have perfect understanding, but I want to read it like it's chronological this time.
Right,
So
right.
I'm going to read the trumpets as if the rapture has already occurred. So when the sixth seal was unlocked, then everyone was trying to hide, and they were saying, the wrath of the
Right.
Lamb has come. So I'm considering that the
Yeah.
seven trumpets here are the wrath of the Lamb being poured out. So
Poured out.
so
Yeah.
what's going to be really important though is that we take note of all the events that happen in the seven seals when they're unlocked, and then we take note of all the events that happen in the seven trumpets when they unlock, or when the trumpets are blown, and then we'll line it up
Right.
with the vials later on. But
Yeah, because I do think that, the seventh trump is the sound, as far as the catching away, and that the church is then protected and called up, and then is going to watch together with Messiah the wrath being poured out on the earth and the wicked and those not written into the books of life.
yeah, that's a really good point. So just following chronologically, we know at the last trump is when
Yes,
we
the
believe the
last
church
trump.
is caught up. So, what the Messiah meant as the last trump, what Paul said about the last trump, was it totally in line with what John later wrote? Because John wrote this after those things were written. So, what exactly was the last trumpet to the Messiah when he was quoting Old Testament, and of course
Mm.
quoting prophecy because he is the spirit of prophecy. But what was Paul talking about when he said that the rapture at the last trump, then the resurrection would occur, then the rapture would occur, and now we have seven trumpets coming. So were these
Hmm.
lined up? Because if we read here in Revelation, it really did seem like in between Revelation 6 and 8 here, we saw the resurrection occur, and we saw the rapture occur because we saw the innumerable multitude at the throne in Revelation chapter 7. So that to me would signify the resurrection and the rapture, of course, because we know they happen simultaneously. The dead in
Right.
Christ rise first, and then we who are alive and remain are caught up together with them in the clouds, and so shall we ever be with the Lord, as it said in 1 Thessalonians 4. Uh, but here it seems like the trumpets don't start until after. So maybe they were referencing something different, but maybe, like we have hinted at earlier, the trumpets kind of happen like somewhere in between the seals. I don't think they line up like perfectly. Like I know Pastor Arnold Murray taught, they kind of line up, but I don't know. We can just read it and we'll try to come to some more conclusions. So we'll start with Revelation 8:2, and it says, I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth, and there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. All right, so I guess we can talk about just this point here, that this is a real place, right? The throne of the Most High. These are real beings, real angels that are going to the altar of the Creator. And this is something we have to kind of like keep up with the vision, right? Like John didn't just write it so that we could, brush it off and not really imagine it. Like he wants us to follow along here. That's why he gives so much description. So you see the seven angels who stand before God, and then you see them given seven trumpets. All right, we can imagine that, right? We're following along. I hope everyone is following along visually in your mind, that you can really imagine what John saw. And then another angel had a golden censer. We've seen this golden censer before in Revelation 5, I believe. And of course, the incense are offered up, and the incense are actually called the prayers of the saints in previous chapters. And they're offered on the golden altar, which is before the throne. So here we see the golden altar, which is before the throne. The smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. All right, so this is a really interesting part, that the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it to the earth. So, a lot of people consider that heaven is like this dimension, right? That heaven is just a dimension like outside of our dimension, and like, it's just like kind of like it messes with your mind a little bit, that there's just multiple dimensions. But really, when you study biblical cosmology, you understand that
Right.
we're in one realm, and of
Yes.
course Earth is where we are, has a dome. It's called
Right.
the firmament, that separates what was said in Genesis, the waters from above from the waters below. And of course, we know
Right.
where the waters are. They're gathered in the seas, they're gathered in the oceans and the rivers and the lakes, and in the rain and the clouds and stuff like that. But there's also, a firmament that separates waters from above. And above this firmament, as we discussed, I think in our third or fourth study here in Revelation, we went through and talked about in Ezekiel chapter 1, and all the visions that were given of the firmament and the throne, the throne of the Most
Yes.
High, that had the sea of glass like crystal that was spread before it. And of course, that was the firmament, we believe. That's the firmament that surrounds and covers the earth, that you call
Yes.
the vaulted dome of the earth, right? And
Right.
then, so that picture makes sense, that okay, there's an angel that is literally at the throne of the Most High, and he's actually going to throw something at the earth. Right? If he was
Right.
in a different dimension, you can't really make sense of it, but he's
Right.
literally like above the firmament.
Above us.
Apparently, at any time that
Yes.
they want, they can, open a door to the firmament or something.
Right.
And
The windows of heaven. Yes.
right, just like it mentioned during the flood, the windows
Yes.
of heaven, right? So we see the angel takes this censer and he fills it with fire and throws it to the earth. And then, there's noises, there's thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So imagine, like, I don't know if you've seen like a Marvel movie like Thor, and they always depict like when he like comes from Asgard to Earth, there's
Right.
like lightning, and then
Right.
there's like big boom, like because it's like lightning. And when lightning comes down and really fast to the earth, there's a loud boom, there's thundering, and then there's lightning. But then this one also causes an earthquake. So it kind of seems like it could be like a meteor, well, that's what NASA will say, right? That, oh, a
Yes.
meteor has landed and it caused a big earthquake. Maybe a tsunami or something happens. But after this happens, then the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepare themselves to sound. So I'll let you comment, and then we'll move on to the trumpets.
Yes. And we see in Luke that Christ said, even when Satan, Lucifer, the son of the morning, was cast out of the heavens, he said, I saw Satan fall like lightning from the heavens. And we see also that in the Testament of Solomon, in verses 113 to 15, it speaks about the fallen angels when they come up and they try to listen in on the prophecy and the counsel of the mighty, and to hear about future events, that because they have no place of rest and no refuge and no place where they can just sit and relax and enjoy the habitation, they are banished from the upper heavens. That when they wear themselves out trying to stay aflight, they fall like shooting stars, in meteoric crash to the earth. And so we, again, we see these things spoken about. And yes, without a doubt, in the biblical cosmology, um, the the heavens, the divided into three and into seven, as described in the book of the Secrets of Enoch, and the ascension of Isaiah, the martyrdom of Isaiah, those different books. It's the same thing. The concept is that just as the Holy of Holies, the third heaven is the place of the Most High. And this is also where the throne room is, and that this is above the Polaris, which is the sides of the north, that the firmament rises from all sides to the north. And the northern point is the place where the apex, the pinnacle, where it joins in union. And this is where the throne room is established. And also paradise, New Jerusalem. And this is, of course, the most strategic location as well for the Most High to establish his overlook, because from there, the center, he can see everywhere, the whole boundary and the extremes of what is the ends of the earth. And, what better place to establish your throne than in the center where you can see all things. Not that he needs to physically see, of course, he knows all things, even the desires of all of our hearts. But yeah, without a doubt, there is a physical relationship to the dimensionality of the worlds as they join together, the ethereal and the spirit and the matter, and the ethereal with the material worlds. And so all of it comes together. And we see that the earth even is a union, a meeting place for spirit and matter, and that Sheol and the place of Legion and their ruling place is below us. And so that whole concept of heaven above and hell below is factual. And according to biblical cosmology, this is the truth of where we reside in world and dimensionality.
Yeah, so you see here, the 7 trumpets are getting ready to open. I was just doing like I like to do and looking at the cross references that are mentioned here for the verses in Revelation. So if you haven't used blueletterbible.com before, it's a free website, and they also have a free app for your cell phone. And you can actually click the tools on any verse in the scripture. So I took Revelation 8:5, and it talks about the angel that took a censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth. And then you see these signs that there's noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. And I want to cross-reference that and see if there are any other scriptures that talk about these things. And when we look, there actually are. In Revelation 11:19, it says, "And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his temple, and there were lightnings, noises, thunderings, and an earthquake." But this time we also see and great hail. In Revelation 16:18, "And there were noises and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such a mighty and great earthquake as had not occurred since men were on the earth." So you kind of see this is like a precept, right? These 4 things: the noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So potentially this is a sign that what we see here, right before the trumpets are blown, maybe we could look over in Revelation 11:19 and Revelation 16:18, and maybe they kind of give us a hint that when this is mentioned, it lines up together.
We'll be right back, and yeah, we'll see that.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
In those days, there were giants in the land, and the sons of the angels of God looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives, and their sons became of old great men of renown. So they have been mixing with us on a genetic level since the time of Enoch and Ezekiel's will.
Here on Earth we're intrigued by the sun, moon, and stars, and imagine there's got to be planets like ours. So conceive of a face on the surface of Mars, so in need of a meaning and purpose we fall. And indeed they believe that these might be our gods, or that maybe with time we'll do right and evolve, and eventually reach what they seek and then solve all the problems of man. But they really don't know that they fall, and the works of our hands are but just filthy rags. So we travel the lands to dig up our past. Time elapses, and with it are much of the facts. Some imagine that gods came in alien class and react in this way that's so desperate for me.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for a second portion. I will turn it back over to you, son, and let you finish up your point.
All right, welcome back, everybody. What a great song from Destiny.
Yeah, I
Realm.
love that song.
I think that has to be one of my most listened to songs of all time. Ezekiel's
I
Wheel. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a great song. All right, so let's continue. We were looking at the 4 signs in Revelation 8:5 that there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. Okay, and this happened as the 7th seal was opened. All right, and it happens right before the 7 angels sound the 7 trumpets. All right, so what's really interesting is if we cross-reference these points here, the noises, thunderings, lightnings, and earthquake, we see this happens 2 other times in the book of Revelation. And do you want to guess when we see these?
Sorry, I was reading through the chat room. 2 incidences where what happens now?
The noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake happens 2 other times as mentioned in Revelation. You want to take a guess where or when they happen?
Is that what you had just mentioned before? You said Revelation 11 and Revelation 16.
Yeah.
But I'm just going by what you said.
Yeah, well, specifically, this is when the 7th trumpet sounds, as we see in Revelation chapter 11. But interestingly enough, right after the 7th trumpet is sounded, you see something kind of similar to the end of the seals. And, you know,
Right.
at the end of the seals, everyone is saying, oh, you know, the wrath of the Most High has come. You know, the people were saying, oh, hide us from the wrath of the Lamb.
Right.
Right, and here we see when the 7th angel sounds the 7th trumpet. I'm kind of moving forward here, but I'm just making a point. It says in Revelation 11:18 that, you know, the nations were angry and your wrath has come. So this happens at the 7th trumpet. So the 7th trumpet seems to 100% line up with the 7th seal. And especially when we look here in the verse, then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his temple, and there were lightnings, noises, thunderings, and an earthquake. We also see great hail. All right, but we see those 4 signs: the lightnings, the noises, thundering, and an earthquake. All right, so let's look. The last time that these are mentioned is in the 7th bowl. When the 7th bowl is poured out into the air, a loud voice comes out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, "It is done." And there were noises and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such a mighty and great earthquake as it had not occurred since men were on the earth. All right, and then we see great hail comes from heaven, and men blaspheme God because of the plague of the hail. All right, so we see, you know, the wrath of the Lamb is being poured out again. So this is pretty interesting. We had to just, you know, put this aside because we haven't gotten this far. But this is something important, you know, when we notice a precept like this, it kind of gives us a signature moment, like a snapshot in time. We can kind of, you know, not 100% say that they're definitely the same event, but it definitely seems like this is
connection and congruency. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so we'll move on to when the 7 trumpets are sounded. So in Revelation 8:6 it says, so the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first trumpet. The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Now that is pretty intense. Hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. I wonder, you know, what does it mean, mingled with blood?
It's interesting to me that when you read the Colburn Bible in the study of the return of the destroyer, it makes a mention of this red dust that accompanies this particular object, as it is, wormwood, and the destroyer and wormwood, I think, to be the same thing. And here we see it's cast into the sea. But that when in the past it made its appearance, there was this red dust that would also appear, and that it would enter into the streams and to the rivers, and it would turn it into blood, or what was the appearance of blood. And so maybe there's, some connection with that.
Yeah, that's
with,
interesting.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to try to look that up while you're talking so I can share it.
Yeah, so, all right, so we see the hail and the fire, and it's mingled with blood, and it's thrown to the earth. And the third of the trees are burned up, and all green grass is burned up. So, hail and fire. That is something very interesting to take note of, that hail is mentioned here. And, we saw that accompanied with the noises and thunderings, lightnings, and earthquake before. So just something to take note of. You see hail, but what's interesting is that the hail here has fire that follows it. So I imagine this is going to be something like Sodom and Gomorrah. Fire was cast from heaven onto Sodom and Gomorrah and burned them up. But here we see a third of all the trees are burned up, and all green grass is burned up. That's a big statement. So wildfires, all these crazy things, and of course, what is the world going to say? Oh no, we've had meteorites come from outer space, and we're doing our best to get it under control. But don't worry, the scientists are at work. Don't pay attention to the Bible that said that this happened, that this would happen. Pay attention to us. This was just a cosmic occurrence, and let's hope that our scientists are prepared to catch it before the next one happens. All right, but
yeah,
go ahead.
Whenever you're ready for it, I can share this really quickly too.
Yeah.
This is from chapter 5 of the Colburn Bible. It's called The Destroyer, and it's from the scroll of Adipa. And it's not very long, so it won't take up that much time. It says this: the doom shape called the Destroyer in Egypt was seen in all the lands whereabouts. In color, it was bright and fiery, in appearance changing and unstable. It twisted about itself like a coil, like water bubbling into a pool from an underground supply, and all men agree it was a most fearsome sight. It was not a great comet or a loosened star, being more like a fiery body of flame. Its movements on high were slow. Below it swirled in the manner of smoke, and it remained close to the sun, whose face it hid. There was a bloody redness about it which changed as it passed along its course. It caused death and destruction in its rising and setting. It swept the earth with gray cinder rain and caused many plagues, hunger, and other evils. It bit the skin of men and beasts until they became mottled with sores. Same thing as in Revelation. The earth was troubled and shook. The hills and mountains moved and rocked. The dark smoke filled heavens, bowed over earth, and a great howl came to the ears of men, borne to them upon the wings of the wind. It was the cry of the dark Lord, the master of dread. Thick clouds of fiery smoke passed before him, and there was an awful hail of hot stones and coals of fire. The doom shape thundered sharply in the heavens and shot out bright lightnings. The channels of water were turned back into themselves when the land tilted and great trees were tossed about and snapped like twigs. And then a voice like 10,000 trumpets was heard over the wilderness, and before its burning breath, the flames parted. The whole of the land moved, and mountains melted. The sky itself roared like 10,000 lions in agony, and bright arrows of blood sped back and forth across its face. Earth swelled up like bread upon the hearth. This was the aspect of the doom shape called the destroyer when it appeared in days long gone by in olden times. It is thus described in the old records, few of which remain. It is said that when it appears in the heavens above, earth splits open from the heat like a nut roasted before the fire, and then flames shoot up through the surface and leap about like fiery fiends upon black blood. The moisture inside the land is all dried up. The pastures and cultivated places are consumed in flames, and they and all the trees become white ash. The doom shape is like a circling ball of flame which scatters small fiery offspring in its train. It covers about a fifth part of the sky and sends writhing snake-like fingers down to the earth. Before it, the sky appears frightened, and it breaks up and scatters away. Midday is no brighter than night. It spawns a host of terrible things. These are the things said of the destroyer in the old records. Read them with a solemn heart, knowing that the doom shape has its appointed time and will return. It would be foolish to let them go unheeded. Now men say such things are not destined for our days. May the great God above grant that this be so. But come the day surely will, and in accordance with his nature, man will be unprepared. I'll stop there. There's other portions, but I don't want to read all of them in a row. So we'll comment in between.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to consider, and also really interesting to think that this text was supposedly written by Egyptians after the Exodus, right? So they were,
Right.
this is kind of like ancient Egyptian mythology, or maybe this was part of the Celtic book. I'm not sure, but I don't know how they would have something like this descriptive passed down. Like, I guess they say that something like this happened before. When do you think that would have happened?
Well, again, the records go back even to that the destroyer was part of the destruction of the first world age, and that it made an appearance in the time when Atlantis and what we call Atlantis, and even what is said of the world when it was one land, like Pangea. We were talking about this even with the concept of splinterlands, that the world was destroyed and split into the differing continents and, shifted and broken them apart, but that the native peoples in their mythology, they speak about how the whole of the earth had at one time resembled the back of a turtle, and that the back of the turtle, or what they call Turtle Island, it stood out as one continent among the giant ocean and the outer extremity of what is the the Antarctic Circle, which contains the basin, and where it says in the scripture that the waves are stayed, by the hand of the Most High, that He set the sand there to limit the oceans and to bring and to contain in the basin the world's oceans. And so, but it also did make appearance, as you said, during the Exodus, and there's a description of its appearance during those times. But it's said to have, a cycle where whenever the Most High, even during the flood of Noah's day, there was said to be an appearance of this destroyer, this particular, what is also called, in the Native American, there's called The Last Cry, a book that was put out about the purifier. And they speak about the blue and red star Kachina. And it says in the same manner, it speaks about this particular object as well. I'll read just one small portion. It says in this prophecy, in the final days we will look up in our heavens and we will witness the return of the two brothers who helped create this world in the birthing time. Pangahoya is the guardian of the North Pole, and his brother Palangawaya is the guardian of the South Pole. We know there's not a South Pole, but there's two objects said to be, like Rahu Ketu. In the final days, the blue star Kachina will come to be with his nephews, and they will return the earth to its natural course. Also in the Kolbrin, it says this: the first sky monster was joined by another, which swallowed the tail of the one going before, but the two could not be seen at once. The sky monster reigned and raged above earth, doing battle to possess it. But the many-bladed sword of God cut them in pieces, and their falling bodies enlarged the land and the sea. In this manner the first earth was destroyed by calamity, descending from out of the skies. The vaults of the heavens had opened up to bring forth monsters more fearful, more fearsome than any that ever haunted the uneasy dreams of men. And so, just to share how it goes back to very distant times. And there are prophecies, even amongst the native peoples, of the return of this object. And so, which a lot of the other prophecies that are contained in it link with Revelation as well. And as we go through, I'll share some of this other stuff as well.
I have to ask, do you believe that people survived the destruction of the First World Age?
Yeah, well, according to the manuscripts, it says that they did. And that, that there was a moon that was taken away, and all kind of, cataclysmic transformations. But according to the Kolbrin Bible, some people did survive, and that the records continued. And we see even in, I don't know specifically if this is true, but according to that manuscript, it does speak about the first destruction and then the recreation of the earth. And the Bible also speaks about this, where the earth became without form and void. That was the destruction of the First World Age. 2 Peter speaks about this as that the earth was standing in the water and out of the water, and that the Second World Age would be destroyed by fire, and that everything was so destroyed that the Most High had to create all of the creatures and even humanity, the hominids. Told them, made them in the image of God, told them to go forth, be fruitful, multiply, and to replenish the earth that had been destroyed. And so I do believe that there is absolutely a biblical precedent of the destruction of the earth in distant times.
I believe that. I was just curious if you believed that there were people that survived from before, who you call the pre-Adamites, right? So if there were people that survived that, when the tohu wabohu, right, when it became without form and void, if there were people that survived then during the time of Adam, there were people on the earth, right? There were these tribes of people who never received the same spirit that Adam received, right? So I'm just curious if any of these bloodlines are mentioned in the Bible.
I do believe that, well, first we see that the pre-Adamites, that they were created male and female, and that they were created specifically on the earth, and that they were spread forth to the ends of the earth. And I believe that these were made the different colors and the different races of humanity. But also, I believe that what we see of the people that were here before the pre-Adamites, that these were the fallen angels, and also a giant race that we see even here in the prehistory of the Americas, that the native people speak about a race of giants that lived before, and that we see in the mythology the mention of the Olympians and the Titans. And so I believe that race of, and it's not even what you would call human beings, because I think Adam and their race is, something that came after, but that the hominids that lived during that time were giants, even what we see in the mythology as cyclops, trolls, dwarves. There were even hobbits, little people. There were a wide array and different diverse species of hominids, and not like modern humanity that appeared later on the scene. But that there were also, what we see as reptilian races, the Naga people, who were said to be all kind of different, weird and strange, anomalous beings. There were hybrid creatures, centaurs, those kind of things, that lived during those times. And we find a lot of that in the mythology. Even the founder of Athens was said to be like a gorgon. He had a serpentine lower body, but was human from the waist up. And we see that Medusa in the mythology, that she is depicted as being one of these gorgon species. And so I think that there were a lot of different hominid type beings and peoples and creatures that we can't necessarily classify as human or modern human, but they lived, they did exist, and I do believe that they were very much larger in stature and had longer lifespan than we do currently, or even what the original humans, Adam, living 930 years when he was created by the Most High. And so we can't think of the ancients as being human in the regard that we know humanity today. If that makes sense.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. We did get a little bit sidetracked from our study on Revelation. I apologize. But I know everyone enjoys hearing you go off and just rant about those things. I did have some questions, and then you were able to share your thoughts on those. But after the break, we'll get back into the Revelation study.
Sounds good. We will be back for second hour in just a short bit. Be right back, everyone.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
The appearance of the twins begins a period of 7 years. This will be our final opportunity to change our ways. Everything we experience is all a matter of choice. Many will appear to have lost their souls in these final days. So intense will the nature of the changes be that those who are weak in spiritual awareness will go insane, for we are nothing without spirit. They will disappear, for they are just hollow vessels for anything to use. Life will be so bad in the cities that many will choose to leave this plane, some in whole groups. Only those who return to the values of the old ways will be able to find peace of mind, for in the earth we shall find relief from the madness that will be all around us. It will be a very hard time for women and children, for they will be shunned, and many of the children in these times will be unnatural, some being from the stars, some from past worlds. Some will even be created by man in unnatural manner and will be soulless. Many of this people will be empty in spirit, no life force in their eyes. And as we get close to the time of the arrival of the purifier, there will be in those who walk as ghosts through the cities, through canyons they will have constructed, in their man made mountains. Those that walk through these places will be very heavy in their walk. It will appear almost painful as they take each step, for they will be disconnected from their spirit and from the earth. And then after the arrival of the twins, they will begin to vanish before your eyes like smoke. Others will have great deformities, both in the mind and upon their bodies. There will be those who would walk in the body that are not from this reality. For many of the gateways that once protected us will be opened, and there will be much confusion. Confusion between the sexes and children and their elders. Life will get very perverted, and there will be little social order in these times. Many will ask for the mountains themselves to fall upon them just to end their misery, and still others will appear as if untouched by what is occurring. The ones who remember the original teachings and have reconnected their hearts with spirit, those who remember their mother and their father. When the purifier comes, we will see him first as a small red star, which will come very close and sit in our heavens, watching us to see how well we have remembered the sacred teachings. That's from The Last Cry, and it's about the purifier. But what I wanted to bring forth and how it connects with Revelation is this passage that many will ask for the mountains themselves to fall upon them just to end their misery, and how that fits in with, the passage in Revelation where they call for the mountains to fall upon them to hide them from the face of the Lamb.
And what book was that from?
This is the Kachina prophecies, The Last Cry. And it's about, it's a Native American prophecy about the return of the purifier, which I believe is wormwood, and also what is spoken about in the Colburn Bible as the destroyer.
It's really interesting. It definitely is. It seems so like perfectly lining up with
Right.
the biblical scripture. I'd be interested to know the history behind that text and exactly when it was written and all that. But yeah, definitely see a lot of really interesting things that are definitely happening today. People being confused with what gender they are, no social hierarchy.
Right.
And then it was really interesting. It mentioned that there would be like cloned people with no souls, right? So yeah, really interesting to consider. And then that last part, it reminds me of that, I think I talked about with you before, that movie that was on Netflix, that Don't Look Up. And it was about the asteroid
I
that was
haven't
coming.
seen that yet.
Did you see that one?
Yeah. No, not yet.
So,
I'd seen portions of it, though, as far as the preview.
Right.
But
so,
no, I
the
have
point
not
that I
seen it
wanted to make was that in the movie, like there's an asteroid that's going to come, and it shows up just as a dot in the sky, right? So really similar. I can imagine it's going to show up like that here, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
we'll move on. I want to share because we kind of see that
Yes.
same thing here when the third trumpet is sounded. But first, the second trumpet. So the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So it seems like a geographic location here. It's something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. So that's interesting. Some people maybe like a volcano. It doesn't say necessarily that this was like thrown out of heaven. It just says that it was thrown into the sea, something like a great mountain burning with fire. And a third of the living creatures in the sea died. So I assume this is something that happens in a specific geographic location. And then you see a third of the ships were destroyed. That's really, really interesting. So moving on to the third angel that sounds, a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. And the name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. That's really interesting as well. This great star that falls from heaven. And of course, we've been reading from the Colburn and talking about this, the destroyer. But it's interesting to consider what we believe, right, is that the stars are angels.
Right.
So you see an angel that is falling here, and it falls on the rivers. So here's the question: is this really rivers and really springs of water, or is it like the prophetic sense of the word water, where the water represents people? I don't know. Well, when we go further, it says a third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. So is that a symbolic for war, that the Antichrist came here, the great star fell from heaven and corrupted a third of the people, and then a third of the people made war and killed another third of the people? Or is this really just like an asteroid event or something like that? What's your opinion?
I could see it being both, that we see that there are many layers to the scriptures, and that metaphorically what we see interpreted in symbolism, even, like Eve eating fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and how this veils symbolically that she was physically seduced, and that she became an adulteress and she lost her virginity. And then, I mean, those kind of things must be interpreted, that led to her multiplying in bearing children in sorrow. And so, yeah, I could see how these kind of things and other parables we see all throughout scripture, that in parable form many things are presented in riddle, and that it is, and even a lot of times, the angels in the scriptures relay what the meaning of those riddles are, and especially in Second Esdras, where we see the whole end times and the millennial reign and all of that laid out in metaphor. We also see the interpretation of those symbols. And so, we are left without having to try to interpret, but we are given the interpretation for those kind of things. But here in Revelation, it's not exactly clear in that manner. And that's why I think that, we are to look to and read the other narratives that the Most High and the prophets and the apostles have given us on the interpretation of the end times. Even Matthew 24 and Mark 13, Luke 21, and the Apocalypse of Peter which are specific to when the apostles asked Christ about his return and the end of the age. And so, without a doubt, those things connect to the book of Revelation as revealed to John. And that, this was like the book of Enoch in portions of it, was written for a remote and distant generation. And so, yeah, there's and that's the incredible thing about the study of prophecy and the study of the scriptures, is that we are still learning. I mean, these things have been looked over and studied by people, wiser than us, in for thousands of years. And the things that are now coming to light were hidden to them, because they were not living in the times that we are. And so I think that because we are in the fig tree generation, that the Most High is bringing everything to light in a way that has not been revealed previously. And, even the work with the flat earth as key to decrypt the book of Enoch, I think that is part of, secrets being revealed, and that many people are part of the work of bringing forth new revelation as never considered before. Even what we're doing now.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to read some of the cross-reference verses from Wormwood. And just from browsing through it, it kind of seems like this would definitely be a spiritual sense of the word. It seems like Wormwood has to do with the worship of false prophets or idolatry. So let's read from Deuteronomy 29:18. It says, "So that there may not be among you man or woman or family or tribe whose hearts turn away today from Yahuwah our Elohim to go and serve the gods of these nations, that there may not be among you the root bearing bitterness or wormwood," serving the gods of the other nations. That's interesting to consider, that a fallen angel or a fallen star here could come to the earth, be accepted by most of the world, or a third of the world, right? To worship those, the previous fallen angels. Interesting.
And it's interesting that, a third of the world, 2/3, that is 666.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good point. Yes, mathematically, 2/3 is 666. So that's really interesting to consider, the timing of all of the fallen angels.
Right.
So even in Revelation 12, we see a third of the stars fall, right? Are deceived and fall. But I wonder, the timing of the fallen angels, I always thought all the fallen angels were already cast out.
Yeah, and I do believe that is the truth of the matter, and that they are legion. But I think also that, we see that with this particular age, that if you consider the book of Jubilees, that during the flood of Noah's time, Noah prayed, and it says that Mastema, that 1/10 of the fallen angels were taken and were imprisoned during that time. And it could be that here, because we are in the last generation, the fig tree generation, that the forces of legion come in mass, and it could even represent like the Antichrist, is given the key to loose and open the bottomless pit, that we see the giants and devils and demons and what are called the Shittim are released from that pit. And also I think, that the whole theme of an ancient alien, extraterrestrials returning, that this could be part of what is a a new release where a third of the angels of Legion are allowed to, join Lucifer in what is this final rebellion before the millennial age. That during the time of the 7 years and of his open rule, the 3.5 years, the 42 months of the Great Tribulation, that they will be here and, arming and part of his army in a manner that hasn't been for a very, very long time. And that even when Christ came in first advent, we see that Legion recognized that, there was this time that was coming. And that it also says in the scriptures too, and that we see that woe unto the earth and sea, for the devil comes down to you knowing that his time is short. So I think that the Antichrist and all of that, and even this Revelation 12, that this, is still part of what is the end times, and that, there's going to be this renewed fallen angel threat, and also an appearance of spiritual wickedness openly, that the veils are thinning, even as I read from the Hopi prophecy, where it speaks about the spiritual worlds overlapping the material, and then a lot of that bleeding over into the physical. And we see that there's all kind of weirdness, even cloning, and people, it even says that some of the star children will be born into this time. And so, yeah, I think a lot of that weirdness that we don't understand is going to manifest in ways where, even now we see that kids are involving themselves in the occult, and there's all this demonic manifestation, shadow people.
Definitely made me think of CERN as well. Obviously,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
opening of the lost
Right,
portals. But do you mind if I cut in and
No,
read?
please continue. Yeah, let's
So
finish it up.
speaking of wormwood, there's a really good prophecy that I just found in Jeremiah 23 that talks about wormwood, and I'll just go ahead and read it. It says, "Therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, Yahuwah Spavot, I believe. Lisa can correct me, or Noble can correct me." Concerning the prophets, "Behold, I will feed them with wormwood and make them drink the water of gall." All right, now pay attention to this second part. "For from the prophets of Jerusalem profaneness has gone out into all the land. Thus says the Lord of hosts, do not listen to the words of the prophets who prophesy to you. They make you worthless. They speak a vision of their own heart, not from the mouth of Yahuwah. They continually say to those who despise me, Yahuwah has said, you shall have peace. And to everyone who walks according to the dictates of his own heart, they say, no evil shall come upon you. Or who has stood in the counsel of Yahuwah and has perceived and heard his word? Who has marked his word and heard it? Behold, a whirlwind of Yahuwah has gone forth in fury, a violent whirlwind. It will fall violently on the head of the wicked. The anger of Yahuwah will not turn back until he has executed and performed the thoughts of his heart. In the latter days, you will understand it perfectly." That's an interesting point there, that in the latter days you'll understand. So this is definitely, it seems like this is part of the judgment, right? The wrath of the Lamb that's being poured out. Because I have not sent these prophets, yet they ran. I have not spoken to them, yet they prophesied. But if they had stood in my counsel and had caused my people to hear my words, then they would have turned them from their evil way and from the evil of their doings. All right, so what I wanted to point out is that it says here that it's from Jerusalem that the profaneness has gone out into all the land from Jerusalem. And we know in 2 Thessalonians 2, it says that the false Messiah, the son of perdition, will set himself up in the temple of the Most High, which we know is established in Jerusalem.
Right. Yes.
And so what we see here in Revelation chapter 8 this great star that fell from heaven, burning like a torch, that potentially this star is a fallen angel, and that when it falls on a third of the rivers and on the springs of the waters, that these are, towns and villages, people, and then a third of the people literally become bitter, right? And then people die from the water because it's made bitter. All right, so
Yeah.
I don't always interpret scripture symbolically. I try to take it as literally as possible. I can definitely see potentially there's this thing that's going to fall from heaven, a star, which I believe would be an angel, and that it could literally corrupt, make water bitter, and could literally poison people. But I could also see symbolically here that this has to do with the profane teachings of the false one coming to the earth. All right, so let's move on. That's just interesting to consider, and I definitely appreciate everybody in the chat sharing as well. I guess just an interesting point, right? That you talk to any like modern day Christian, like a churchianity, churchgoer, a Sunday Christian, not saying anything bad about any of them, but just point out to them like, hey, that some stars are going to fall to the earth in the end times, and it very well could be in our day, and just kind of like shake them up, like who really believes that that's going to happen?
Yeah, not very many people. And this was a point that Rob made, especially with scientism and the whole idea that people believe in the heliocentric cosmology, and that the scriptures are clear that the stars are going to be shaken like the leaves of a fig tree and come crashing here to the earth. And in like the sibling oracles, the passage that you read previously on show, and in others, even in 2 Peter, where it speaks about the earth, there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, and that this one is going to be destroyed in fervent heat and melted away. That's part of the process of the stars crashing to the earth. And they, if these stars are supposed to be like so huge and bigger than the earth and all that, how any of that makes any sense? But still, they are coming crashing here to the earth. And so, and then the whole idea of them being angels as well, that's important to understand in the deception that is, the ancient alien belief, and that the extraterrestrials created us, because that is part of the strong deception. And all that is playing out, and many people are going to take and bend the knee to this belief system and take it on as their theology.
That's what they hail as the most ancient theology, right?
Exactly. That's right.
That's what all the scholars of the day believe.
Right.
And so, that was an interesting point. In Revelation 6, we had read during the sixth seal was opened, the stars of heaven fall to the earth, right? And now we see during the third trumpet that sounded, a great star falls from heaven. So, you actually see a few different times that there are these different stars that fall from heaven, right? So it makes you think, like, is there like a judgment, and then like a group of them are thrown out, and then like a bigger judgment for like specific leaders of them, and then they're cast out? I'm not really sure, but moving on to the fourth trumpet, it makes me want to take it more literal again, because we see, the fourth angel sounds, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. And I looked, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blasts of the trumpets of the three angels who are about to sound. So here, the three woes are about to come and take place with the fifth through the seventh trumpet. But here, in the fourth trumpet, it seems like the luminaries are struck. And I don't know, I guess you could also take this as symbolic as well, since we know in Revelation 12 that a third of the stars is actually a third of the angels that are struck. But then what would a third of the sun and a third of the moon be?
I think it has to do with the light, as we saw in other portions.
Yeah,
of
so more literal.
We'll be right back. Yes.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Hello friends, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
welcome back everybody for final segment. And I'm gonna let you comment and finish up with your point, and then I'll share something that, yeah, I do believe this is literal. And what I'll read from after you comment is just where John asked the Messiah. And again, I said, Lord, what will become of the heavens and the sun and the moon along with the stars? And so the answer is connected to these seals and the openings. And I do believe that it is an effect in the luminaries that being visible is a sign in the heavens, and that all the people of the earth can see. And that this is an indication of, the things that are written here in scripture, and to let them know where we are in the unfolding of the end times.
Yeah, it's a really interesting chapter to read and verse to consider, that a third of the sun is struck, a third of the moon is struck. Like, what would it mean that a third of the sun is struck? I can't really wrap my mind. Like, I don't know, like, would there just be like a black spot on a third of the sun, or what do you think?
Or that in some manner, like the Most High, that whatever the actual striking of the sun and the moon, what it means, I believe the effect is that there's a diminishing of its luminosity, and that here we see it says, and I heard a voice saying to me, behold, righteous John. And I looked and I saw a lamb having 7 eyes and 7 horns. And again I heard a voice saying to me, I will bid the lamb come before me. And I will say, who will open this book? And all the multitudes of the angels will answer, give this book to the lamb to open it. And then will I order the book to be opened. And when he shall open the first seal, the stars of the heaven shall fall from the one end of it to the other. And when he shall open the second seal, the moon shall be hidden, and there shall be no light in her. And when he shall open the third seal, the light of the sun, um, the light of the sun shall be withheld, and there shall not be light upon the earth. And when he shall open the fourth seal, the heavens shall be dissolved, and the air shall be thrown into utter confusion, as saith the prophet. And the heavens are the works of thy hands, they shall perish, but thou endurest, and they shall all wax old as a garment. And when he shall open the fifth seal, the earth shall be rent, and all the tribunals upon the face of all the earth shall be revealed. And when he shall open the sixth seal, the half of the sea shall disappear. And when he shall open the seventh seal, Hades shall be uncovered. And so I do believe that, even, is this an eclipse? Is this because, when, oh, you didn't get a chance to see it, but when we went and saw the full eclipse here as it crossed northern Georgia, it was an incredible, I mean, what happened in the heavens, and being able to see and to witness, the disappearance of the light of the sun was fantastic. I mean, it was absolutely miraculous, and it was definitely, a sign in the heavens, and that everybody in the world was able to see it, as far as those that were in the fullness of it, but even those that were even just a portion, they saw, most of the eclipse of the sun, but definitely 100% eclipse. The experiences, I mean, it was, miraculous. I mean, magical. But I don't know, is that what it's talking about here with the light of the sun being withheld. But again, we don't know. But I do think that there is a physical change in the light of both the sun, the moon, and the stars come crashing to the earth. And how that plays out, I mean, that in itself is going to be an incredible thing. Is it a meteor shower? I don't know, but yeah, I think it's going to be a fantastic display, and it's going to be something that all the people on the earth are going to be forced to look up and to recognize that something supernatural is happening. And I already think that all the other signs of the seasons will be in play, and that people will just be, that this will be a further confirmation as to their being in the end times.
Yeah, definitely. When this happens, there's already going to have been, a meteor, as they
Right.
will say, that has
Mhm.
fallen. There's already going to be a great
A
mountain
giant
that's
one,
burned with fire that was
Right.
thrown into the sea. The sea became blood. A third of the trees were burned up, and all
Right.
green grass was burned up. So, when this happens, I wonder if it's just going to be for a day, or for one time. Like we know
Mhm.
Amos prophesied. I think it was Amos 8:10 that prophesied of the Passover when the Messiah would be crucified, that in the midst of the day that there would be darkness, something like this. Like you
Mhm.
mentioned, maybe an eclipse or something, but
Right.
there's gonna be a third of the day that doesn't shine, and then a third of the night that doesn't shine either. So it's just gonna be like
Mhm.
darkness, I guess, for 8 hours.
Perpetual. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and even during the time, because a lot of people believe that an eclipse happened during the time that Messiah was crucified, but it says in the scriptures that this was at least a 3-hour event. That even in the
And it happened
Pontius
during the full
Pilate, his
moon.
report to Tiberius Caesar, and that all the stars came out when the sun was blotted out, and that they were seen, and it was darkness so dark that they had to use candles, or whatever, lanterns or lights or whatever they used to move throughout the day, and that it remained this perpetual darkness, so that all the world experienced it, and it wasn't just something that was only seen supernaturally in Jerusalem, but people in China and other places reported upon it, and that it affected everybody in the same manner that I think this event everybody will recognize, all the people, just like where it speaks about the return of the Son of Man, and how like lightning the sign will be seen from east to west across the whole world. Every eye shall see.
hmm Well, I got I guess, a little joke for you here. The word for smitten, it says that a third of the sun, moon, and stars would be smitten. It says that this word actually is another form of the Greek word that means to flatten out. So apparently, the luminaries are going to be flattened like the earth.
All right.
No, but
That's funny.
all in reality, this is kind of like, so if I go to the root word is plaso, and it actually means to form or to mold, and it's a word that's used of potters that are like forming or molding something. So it's another type of that word. It's not like same verb, just I guess a different use. And this word, it's the only time that it's ever used in Scripture, right here, that a third of the sun, the moon, and the stars were struck. So what exactly that means, I'm not really sure. It was struck or flattened out. I can't make any sense of what exactly that means, but what we get is that for 8 hours, for 4 hours of the day and for 4 hours of the night, there's no light. So that's interesting. Maybe, doesn't Enoch says that there's a certain amount of angels that lighten the sun, right?
Right,
I wonder if
1,000.
it's similar to the moon, like,
Right.
because we definitely see a third of the angels in Revelation 12 are cast out. So I wonder if at this point there's like a judgment that takes place, that
Uh-huh.
this is when the stars are judged, and then their light is taken from them. They're not cast out yet, but this is a darkness that takes place in heaven. So I don't know.
Right.
I'm reaching
Yeah,
here, right?
I think that, there could be something to that, because again, the stars are cast down here to the earth. And that we know that after the wrath of God is poured out and there is a new heaven and a new earth, that Christ comes to take his judgment seat. And then the jury trial of every soul, all the fallen angels and those that rebelled against him, is here upon the earth. And that every knee shall bow, every tongue confess. And even, like right after it makes mention of the seals here, open the seventh seal, Hades shall be uncovered. And then the very next portion is, and I said, Lord, who will be the first to be questioned and to receive judgment? And I heard a voice saying to me, the unclean spirits along with the adversary, I bid them to go into outer darkness where the depths are. And I said, Lord, in what place does it lie? And I heard a voice saying to me, here, righteous John, so all of the fallen angels are brought before him for judgment. And this is before the Christians and the humans and, Adam's race, because then it says, and I said, Lord, and after them, what nation will be questioned? And I heard a voice saying to me, here, righteous John, there will be questioned of Adam's race, those nations, both the Greek and those who have believed in idols and in the sun and the stars, and those who have defiled the faith by heresy, and who have not believed the holy resurrection, and have not confessed the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. And then will I send them away into Hades. And I think it's interesting that it says of Adam's race, meaning, modern humanity, because I think, again, there were pre-Adamites before, and that Adam's race is specific to modern humanity and those that have been of the ancestry of Adam for the last 6,000 years.
Yeah, really interesting point. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I wanted to read a cross-reference verse about the third part of the sun being darkened, and I thought it's interesting. In Joel 2:10 it says, the earth quakes before them, the heavens tremble, the sun and moon grow dark, and the stars diminish their brightness. So that word there just kind of stuck out to me, that they diminish their brightness. And that's kind of like what you had referenced earlier, that maybe they just grow a little dimmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And also, talking about Joel.
Right.
Joel is an interesting read. So maybe if we continue, we can kind of reference that passage in Joel here and see where that fits in as well. Because of course, all prophecy of the end time, it fits together in layers, right?
Yes.
So
absolutely.
We're just trying to look for precepts and then figure out how they all fit together.
Right.
And that's a lifelong journey, isn't it? There's so much.
It is.
And it's such an amazing blessing to be able to study these things with you and with all of you. All right, so
absolutely,
let's continue. What do you say? Maybe we won't get through.
Absolutely.
I guess we definitely won't get through Revelation 9, but we can start at least, because reading of the fifth angel, we're seeing another star that's falling. So the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star falling from heaven to the earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit, and he opened the bottomless pit. Oh, all right, this sounds interesting, right? Because Joel kind of speaks about this. And he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace, so the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. That was definitely, we can go back to that reference of the stars being dim, and there were a lot of cross-reference verses that talk about the smoke that would darken the sun. So I'm not sure that this is directly relating to the previous verse, or the third trumpet, because we saw the fourth trumpet, when the day and the night don't shine for a third of them. I don't know what causes that darkness, but now in the fifth trumpet there is smoke.
Right.
That, and I guess it's distinct to the fifth trumpet here, because John didn't reference it in the fourth trumpet. So in the fifth, we see smoke arises out of the bottomless pit. That kind of reminds me of that reading that you were taking from the Colburn. It was talking about when the destroyer comes near the earth, the cracks, there are like cracks in the earth, and great fire comes out of the cracks, and you can imagine, smoke, of course, is going to come with fire. So this bottomless pit is opening up. Smoke comes out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. This is like hell opening up, right? And then that smoke, it says, so the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. Then out of the pit, or out of the smoke, a locust came upon the earth, and to them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. All right, so does that remind you of Joel at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can kind of, I guess, fit in Joel right here, right?
Right.
We saw that that the precepts there. And they were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth, or any green thing, or any tree, but only those men who have not the seal of God in their foreheads. So that's interesting. If we were, like we mentioned earlier, we're taking this kind of as a chronological reading with the seals. So if the seals already happened, we saw the sealing of the 144,000. The 144,000 weren't taken up. They were left on the earth to endure through this time. So we see this doesn't mean that all of the Christians and every believer is left on the earth. This just means that potentially there's just the 144,000 that are on the earth. And everyone else is going to be receiving the wrath of the Lamb here, that he's allowing this to happen, that these locusts are coming up out of the bottomless pit, I guess out of Tartarus maybe. And they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. In those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will desire to die, and death will flee from them. So I don't know who exactly would be left on the earth. I don't know the exact timing, but potentially this is after the Antichrist, right? And after the mark of the beast. I know that doesn't happen until Revelation 13, but potentially that already happened, and we just don't get details about it earlier. Maybe, how can you explain that people will want to die but they can't die?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I do agree that this is after, because the Antichrist, the bottomless pit, releasing the locust army, this is all part of the wrath of God that is poured out on those not written into the books of life, that have no part in salvation, that have missed the boat, that are now going to be tried by the wrath of God being poured out. And the majority of them are, again, those not written into the books of life. And so it could be, as we had talked about, like with the AI technology and people doing, like with this Tesla phone, there's this fusion of the AI technology where they're putting chips into animals' brains, and now they have even humans that are willing to do this symbiosis where they are having this neural link implanted into their minds to take on this cyborg technology. I mean, is there some kind of weirdness to this kind of thing? Because even there was a show called the 100, and at the last season of the show, it talked about these people that were called the ancients or the immortals, and what they would do is they would get people to, they would trick them and they would donate their bodies so that they could download themselves, and they had this ability to escape judgment and death by just continuously downloading themselves into the bodies, into the minds, and take over the spirits of these bodies, and they could live on forever like this. And they did this for a very long time until, the truth came forth, and then the people revolted. But it could be something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you make a good point that it could be after the mark of the beast. There's this technology now where they've created bots, like cellular robots, that can basically change into any cell that you need it to be. It's kind of like a stem cell, like every cell in our body contains the same DNA. It's just depending on the location in our body, it turns into a different type of engine. Like the cells around our hair follicles, they are different than the cells that make up the like lining of our heart. It's the same DNA that's in there. They just are taking on a different shape and a different purpose for the entire body, like a blood cell or what I'm saying. So there are these bots that are kind of like stem cells, and they can change to be whatever they need to be. So what if there's just these little nanobots that will repair. It's kind of like sci-fi movies, like when somebody like gets blown up, and then, or like the Wolverine, he gets like shot and then somehow he's just like healed. He's just got like this superhuman blood that, even though he got shot, even though maybe his heart stopped for a second, there's these little bots that heal everything, all the wounds, and then they can't die.
Right. Yeah, the nanobots, because there is that kind of thing being put into people through the snake bites and things like that too, the super soldiers, and that kind of technology that is being utilized in enhancing. There's even the testimony, Thomas Costello, he speaks about the deep underground bases and how they are doing this super soldier, and also the hybridization of human beings. They're merging them with other species and creating hybrid races to try to enhance capabilities, being able to see in the dark, like owls or things like that, being able to breathe underwater or have flight. I mean, all kind of weirdness there, and we don't know about the kind of experimentation, the kind of things that science is doing in these places that never see the light of day, and the kind of funding they are receiving, and the kind of things that they're doing. And so, what is revealed to us. Yeah, go ahead.
We like to kind of figure out like how scientific advancements could make all of these things possible, right? But there's a spiritual aspect to it as well. I'm sure if the Most High,
absolutely,
commands, then these people can't die because he commands it. So there doesn't have to be a scientific aspect to it, but we're just trying to make a little bit of sense out of it. It's just interesting that these people are going to want to die and they're not going to be able to, and that just tells you for 5 months there, that's the torment of this locust army. So we're going to just read a little bit more. We're almost done, right, with the whole show. The shape of the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were the crowns of something like gold, and on their faces were like the faces of men. They had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots with many horses running into battle. They had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. Their power was to hurt men for 5 months, and they had as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name of Apollyon. All right. So
well, the show went by so quickly, as always. Appreciate all of you. Love you. Be blessed. Good night, all.
Thank you everybody for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.